and welcome to Sim.bc, where right now it's 19:22 in the evening. And yes, I know, it's late. And today I would like to just share with you just some of my own personal opinions, because this is my safe space, This is my safe space of the internet where I can do those things. And even though people might argue, and when I say people, I mean some of your mates, is going to argue, right, that, well, you can't really share those things because you share them online, so is it really that much safe of a space? And to you, sir, and ladies, I like to say, well, yes, I bloody think so anyway. And what I would like to share before we begin is stress. I know it's beginning to be a bit repetitive at this point, but not just any stress. It's the imaginative stress, right, that we're having right now. Many of my fellow, colleagues, many of my fellow students, probably fellow students, because we haven't gotten that piece of paper, that gratifying paper that says that we are now a part of the real world, or we can be if we want to, right? We haven't gotten that yet. So some of my fellow students are at the moment feeling the worst kind of pressure that they felt ever in their lives. Do you want to know why? And do you want to know bloody why these people are feeling like the world is coming crashing down around them? Which is kind of hilarious when you think about it. Not the world coming crashing down beside you, behind you, or around you, but the reason for why. The reason for why is because, well, we have an exam, which is always tough, right? I mean, you need to write and read, a book? You need to read a book and kind of remember, a good 15% of that book in order to pass the exam. I know, we're talking ludicrous things here to pass university. But to get a bit more real, we're talking about a paper, the thesis to be particular. I don't know if I've even mentioned that I've written one, but we have. And a lot of people is feeling this enormous stress because now we're going to defend it against some opponents, So some people are going to read our thesis, for instance, and then meet up with us in a seminar, with a tutor, with a guideline, with a chairman or a chairwoman or whatever, a bit of an audience, and just bombarding us with questions about the thesis. Now, what is the most hilarious thing about this ever, right, is that this is a work that we've spent the last 6 months on completing. And we're not talking a book here, right? We're talking 40 to 45 pages of text, and then the rest is appendixes and figures and tables and stuff. So it might add up to 100, 110 pages at best. And people are so afraid that they won't be able to answer the things that people are going to ask about. But just imagine, just take this as a step. Just step outside for a bit and imagine how much time you've spent on this piece of paper, on this text. You probably know this better than some of the experts in the field. What can I, as an opponent, as a potential opponent, come up and say after reading your paper? All I can say is I don't really get half of these things because you haven't presented them properly, which I guess is kind of a big thing. But mostly it's going to be parts can you further elaborate on your conclusion? I don't really see a sufficient proof of why your conceptual map is presented in the way that it is. Can you perhaps further my understanding or help me to understand your reasoning? That's probably as bad as it's gonna get. And people are like, oh, I can't really do this. What if they ask us questions which we can't answer? What if they do? If you can't answer it, there's probably a bloody good reason for why I can't answer it. For instance, that it's not that relevant for your topic. Why? Well, because you spent the last 6 months dedicating your life to this piece of paper. So if you can't answer it, then the chances are nobody bloody can, right? And obviously we can go back to the fundamental idea that this is an assignment, not an exam. There is no right or wrong. If you have chosen not to have a methodology and introduction, then that might just be your intention. But what you need to do, if that is the case, which it probably shouldn't be, but if it is, you can say this is the reason why. This is kind of what we wanted to convey with this point, right? If your grammar is so bad that you don't even know if it's English or a third or fourth language that you don't understand, then maybe there is a reason for it to be so. It might not necessarily be wrong. And I'm just gonna say, going out on a limb here, that most people I know probably haven't done those mistakes. I don't think that anybody has written English so poorly that someone thinks that it's Taiwanese or whatever, right? I think that most people will be able to read your paper, and the worst case scenario, well, the worst case scenario if you're a bloody idiot, is that you don't have any sources and you're just made it all up. But more realistically, right, the worst thing that's gonna happen is that people are gonna ask you, can you please help me understand what you meant here? Because it's a bit iffy, Anyway, just a point that I thought was hilarious when I see all these people running around at school. Not saying that I don't do that. I'm equally as stressed as everybody else, because potentially it could be a really hard question that comes. Potentially could fail the course because of that. And are we realistically? Probably not. We're probably like 95% safe. Why am I saying that? Not just because it's a 95% confidence interval, yeah, but also because the reason of I probably know about what I've written, right? Or what we've written as a team, as a group. We probably know what we've been writing about the last 6 months, and I don't think that anybody can penetrate our enormous defense, yeah, of knowledge based on reading it like, what, a week before? And that's just, saying that they have read it for a week, which they probably haven't. We're probably talking less than 24 hours here that they've dedicated time towards the thesis. So we're probably all in the clear. Yeah? Yeah. Hilarious and amazing. Anyway, mates, let's continue with what I actually want to talk about, because that was just a short anecdote about my stress and my way to relieve it, yeah? But let's talk about something a bit more interesting. And we're going back to the monk debate. I know, people are on the seat of their chairs. They can't believe it. Are we really going to talk about political correctness again? I mean, how many more angles can there be to actually approach this subject? Not that I'm making a hen out of a feather here, I wouldn't say. But today we're going to talk a bit about seating in the debate to begin with. Obviously leaving a link in the description if you do want to go and check it out yourself, which I highly recommend because I thought it was an amazing piece of debate. Even though they weren't actually talking that much about political correctness, it was just a blast to see two of my favorite, what should we say, debaters, combatants, whatever, just debate on the same side of the podium for, rather against political correctness, but for progress that they didn't think that political correctness were. And what I want to talk about when I'm saying talking seating, yeah, I don't just want to talk about their chairs, yeah? Not that kind of guy. I'm not going to talk about the angle that we're presented in. We're not just talking about how Peterson so amazingly stood up from the chair and had a bit of a stroll around in front of the audience, really feeling it, really getting it, really getting a feeling for it, really warming up the audience to what might come. We're not just talking about that good stuff. No. Rather, we're not talking about that at all. But what we are talking about is the people who sat next to each other. And I'm talking Stephen Fry and Jordan B. Peterson. Specifically. Why specifically those people? Well, because I don't really know Michael Dyson and Michelle Goldberg from before this debate. And when I'm saying no, I don't mean I hang out with them on the weekends drinking tea, even though that would be amazing. A superb opportunity to get a deeper understanding of probably everything, me in comparison to them, right? But also, rather, I actually lost my train of thought. Anyway, we're moving back to the seating. I'm sure it was going to be hilarious, in my opinion, and all of you was going to be sitting there now. Yeah, sure, can we get to the point? I mean, I clicked the video for a reason, and we're like, what, 10 minutes in? And yeah, wrap it up, will you? So what I would just quickly want to talk about is the idea that they actually articulated themselves that Stephen Fry and Jordan B. Peterson tend to not always agree in all places, right? And there's been a reason for why I'm following both of them very closely, because I think that I'm saying very closely, but like when it comes my way, yeah, which is probably not that interested at all. But I like to see them both debate, in no matter really which context they're in. You can sit for hours and hours and hours and listen. And my way of going about, source critique is that I listen to these two people because they have vastly different opinions. They have vastly different values in life. Yeah, they go about things in very different ways. However, their reasoning is going kind of hand in hand with each other. So they're reasoning in kind of the same way. They apply to logic in kind of the same way. They're discussing things in kind of the same way, but yet they have very different values. Now, why is this important to take up at all? Is it just because I want to show off that even in my spare time I give a moment's thought to source critique? Well, it's not only that. It's also that they just happened to sit next to each other when they were discussing political correctness and why they didn't believe in it as progress as the other opposing side did. And I thought that statement of them being on the same side, yeah, was enough to convey my point of that, well, maybe political correctness isn't the best thing ever. And let me just further explain that statement before you get too hurt about it, right? I'm not saying I'm taking a political side here, even though it kind of tends to be so when you're discussing political correctness, because it tends to be associated with one side or the other, depending on who you ask, right? But what I'm trying to say, is completely apolitical, is that it's kind of interesting to see those people on the same side, because generally, political correctness tend to be more of being right than being effective. Stephen Fry said it, paraphrasing here, yeah. And I thought that sounded so sound. Really, it sounded so good. I mean, isn't that really true? People develop this idea, sure, because it's supposed to be, you know, equality for everyone and everybody should be their true individual and they shouldn't be defined as a group, but yet we create more groups to actually define them so that they don't have to be defined by the group that they're already part of. I know, it's hilarious. Anyway. All of these things kind of lead to the idea that, well, if we have Stephen Fry, for instance, he is having some amount, you know, he has some values, yeah, that we like. And if we're connecting this to politics of yesterday, yeah, where political correctness, I would argue, don't have a place in politics, not even identity politics, yeah. You have these two people who have very different values, which I would argue yesterday were kind of a problem, because these people can never seem to find a common ground, even if they're discussing the same thing. Even if two sides are standing there and saying, well, I like blue, and the other side is like, well, I like blue. And then they're debating about it as if it were as if it were a different color to both of them. And they're like, blue, 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 no blue, no blue, no blue. And we can take whatever, red, red, green, green. I don't really care. But the same kind of argument kind of applies. And when I saw these two people on the same side of the debate, I just thought, brilliant. Here are two people, two individuals, which values are not always in alignment, yeah? They don't always agree upon the same things, yeah? I would argue that most of the things they probably don't agree with. However, they can acknowledge that the other person isn't stupid and isn't doing something wrong just because they believe in something different. Which is kind of going against this entire mentality of political correctness to begin with. Sure, political correctness exists so that people can be able to actually think diversely. However, it is exercised, in my opinion, yeah? And how far have I been in contact with the concept? Political correctness is exercised in such a way that it's actually shutting down other people's opinions. Even if they're exploratory or not, it tends to shut them down. So political correctness, in my view, yeah? Yet again, context, in my view, would dictate that these two people should be on opposite sides of this argument, even though they were debating for the same thing. So even though they both take a very individualistic approach, in my opinion, as I said, how I perceive the debate, even though I would say that they take a very individualistic approach towards political correctness and why it's bad, because it kind of neglects the individual altogether. You know, that would dictate that they would be on two different sides. However, they're kind of taking political correctness and throwing it out the window, yeah? Just throwing it out there, shove it out, we don't need you anymore. And they're kind of saying now, well, we can stand on the same side. Why? Well, because I understand that you have different values from me. However, in this particular case, we are actually agreeing. Mending a conflict, building opportunity, helping society, increase the amount of knowledge in the world, being able to switch from one side to the other. And I thought that statement within itself was shown by those two individuals being on the same side of the argument, no matter that they were so very different otherwise. And you might be saying that, well, mate, this is you thinking too much of it, you know, analyzing it too far. And you might be right, I might do that. But then probably Stephen Fry did as well, because I think it was Stephen Fry that actually commented on it when he was there. Actually saying that we don't really believe in the same things all of the time, but as of right now, we still have different political views, different humanitarian views. I don't know, I'm just throwing things out there, right? But he was saying something, paraphrasing, right? We have different views about many different things. However, in this particular case, I would say that I'm on the same side as Mr. Peterson. And I was just thinking, or Professor Peterson, I think he called, said, and I was just like, mind blown. You really sold me there, because actions speaks louder than words, right? We all have heard it. We all know it's kind of true. Not always, but usually true. And when you have people who come and say, well, political correctness is great, even though they don't discuss political correctness, in my opinion, just discussing a fringe branch of political correctness very intensely, but not really discussing the entirety of the concept altogether. And then you have two other people who are trying to do that, in my opinion, yet again, who are also showing with their actions that they're kind of standing up against it, which I thought was enormous. enormously good, right? Actually taking that step and taking that standpoint and just be like, you know what? We're actually on the same side even though we have different values. I don't think that I've said that before. Have I maybe mentioned it 400 times this video? But that just to kind of get this message across that no matter, especially building on yesterday's video, no matter if we have different views in everything else, if we agree on this specific point, I would argue, why not agree on this point? It sounds really stupid when you say it like that, but think about it. If you have different predetermined groups created by political correctness in order to combat prehistoric groups that are considered bad, so we've made new groups which we consider good. The problem still stands that means that people are still part of groups. Right? It's a very collective way of thinking about it. So we've created new groups that are good groups. However, if you're part of one group and I'm part of the other, and we for some reason are not part of the different groups, both of us, and we agree on a subject, we might still disagree because we are of different groups. There's a kind of rival mentality. Politics in a nutshell, am I right? Just my outside view, yeah. Not really expert in anything, except maybe CSR and green management. One can hope after next week. Anyway, I just thought it was so interesting to see these two people on the same side and kind of the action that spoke on their behalf and kind of was aligned with their own, their own subject that they were trying to push. So they were saying that, well, this is what we believe in and this is how we show that we actually believe in it. And I was just like, that's so good. Anyway, mates, I think I've been talking about those two sitting together for the last 3 weeks now or something like that, or 1 or 2 at least, because I think that it's that widely interesting to see two of my favorite debaters ever sitting in the same room, in the same side of a debate, even though they're so different. And I just, fingers crossed, hoped that more politicians in the world could do the same and that they wouldn't be shamed by society for doing so. Wouldn't that just be so much more amazing? Wouldn't every conflict ever be so much easier to avoid, or if not avoidable, be so much easier to solve? Because instead of saying, hey, I don't like you because of this specific reason, even though we agree on all of those reasons, why couldn't you just, step aside to the side of reasons we agree on and say, we don't agree on this one, however, we agree on 90% of the rest of the world, so let's work off that and try to solve our conflict by building on what we're agreeing upon, right? Try to find some common ground, which is probably kind of the mentality I want to get out of this video. So now that I feel compelled to stop, I never do, but now that I feel that I've actually, fulfilled the point I was trying to make with this, I would like to, how do I say this? Excuse myself for the first 10 minutes of me ranting about stress and stress relievement and stuff like that, and I'm just hoping that you stuck around for the latter half when we actually discussed the topic of today. Anyway, mates, have a nice one, and I'll see you tomorrow, you lovely people out there.